This is the end of the show commentary for Best of the Left podcast, episode 519, to be posted August 17th, 2011. You can get the full show in context at bestoftheleft.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. Today, I want to talk about empathy, and I believe this is going to turn into a two-part commentary, so the follow-up to this will show up most likely in the next episode in a few days. So I want to take everyone just kind of step-by-step through this thought process, and we're going to start with empathy in a place where we're all really, really comfortable, and mention a few things that you've probably heard before. And, if you've thought about it for more than a few seconds, you've probably come to the conclusion yourself that conservatives tend to be less empathetic in a variety of ways than liberals or progressives. And the examples that come up most often are, like they're opposed to gay rights, for instance. Maybe they don't know anyone who's gay themselves, and they just have this sense that it's wrong, and so they're not in favor of it. But where these feelings very, very often change is when they're confronted with these circumstances in their own personal lives. So the person who's opposed to gay rights is only opposed to gay rights right up until the moment that they find out that they have a gay person in their family who they love very much, and then they realize, oh, you know what? It turns out gay people can be normal because there's one in my family. Now, the example that I love to quote the most is this real story that I'm trying to tell from memory, but there was a guy who was basically an anti-tax crusader in New York. Didn't want any taxes, and didn't think that the government should be in charge of providing services, and just that should all be privatized, and everyone can pay for it themselves with all the money they save from not paying taxes. Right up until the moment that there was a giant blizzard in New York, and the service of the snowplows were not as well funded as they needed to be. They weren't able to plow the streets other than the really main thoroughfares. And so the side streets were still blocked. And this man, I believe, had not one but two people die during these blizzards because they had health issues like a heart attack or a stroke, and they could not get to the hospital because the streets weren't plowed. And he had a massive change of heart, saying, oh, you know what? It turns out we should raise some taxes to pay for snowplows so that people can be protected during blizzards. Oh, yeah, duh. As a liberal, I would say that's exactly what I've been trying to tell you all along, but you just couldn't see it until it touched your own life. So this is a constant source of frustration for progressives in general, because I think that as a group, we are better at empathizing with situations that don't affect us personally. But we can still say, hey, I think everyone should have healthcare. I think we should have great funding for snowplows. I think that, all gay people should be treated the same, even if I'm not one and don't have one in my family. We're able to empathize a little bit better. And so from our point of view, it's incredibly difficult to understand how it is that conservatives are unable to grasp those sorts of concepts. Because it seems so simple to us. It's so obvious that we should help each other out because it helps everyone. I mean, by helping everyone, we're helping ourselves. Altruism doesn't just have to be that. It can be selfish altruism. So that's step one. That's something we're all probably familiar with, comfortable with. Now, the reason I actually bring this up is because veganism was brought up on the show recently. It was brought up by a caller who was reacting to Citizen Radio. The hosts of that show are vegan themselves and advocate for it strongly. And so this caller was basically saying that he wasn't vegan, didn't intend to be, and didn't particularly appreciate being told that he was wrong for not being vegan. He's like, look, if you want to do it, that's fine, but I'm not going to do it, and I don't need to be told that I'm wrong, basically. And this set off, as was not at all surprising to me, a little bit of a firestorm of back and forth between vegans and non-vegans or meat eaters. So the vegans very, very often will make the argument that by eating meat, you're supporting an industry that literally tortures animals. Animals are sentient beings, and it is utterly immoral to support that industry. And to them, this is an absolutely cut and dried issue. It is painfully obvious to them. They see the videos of what goes on in a slaughterhouse. They're repulsed by it, and it is inconceivable to them that anyone could eat meat after being exposed to something like that. And I totally understand where they're coming from. That is how a regular progressive feels about, these other lesser issues that I, just was talking about. They seem really obvious to us. We understand what's right and what's wrong and what's fair. And my theory is that in the same way that progressives have a heightened sense of empathy over conservatives, I think that vegans and vegetarians who do, who have that, that dietary lifestyle based on ethical reasons simply have a higher heightened sense of empathy than the rest of us. And I believe that in the same way that progressives have a really hard time understanding why conservatives can't understand why empathy is a good thing, I think that vegans have a really, really hard time understanding why, regular progressives don't have the same heightened sense of empathy as they do. And so I have a clip I'm going to play, actually, from Citizen Radio that I think is another piece of anecdotal evidence to add to this conversation, but it is not about veganism. It's just about empathy. And so these people are vegans themselves, and you will see the heightened sense of empathy that they have. And then I'll come back and I'll have one more little factoid that may blow your mind afterwards.
I had to take Desmond. I had to take Desi.
Some of you might be like, which one's that? The fat one.
I had to take the fat cat to the vet today.
Yep.
And I'm legitimately crazy. Like, I cried the whole way there.
Yeah.
And I still feel like I'm going to cry. So I put him in the carrying case, and it's the saddest thing ever. I forget my phone. I forget everything I needed because
That explains why you didn't answer my text messages.
Yep. I'm almost in tears over nothing. I forgot we told your friend this. We didn't tell the radio audience this. When we got, because I consider you guys my friends. Womp. When I got an email from the previous owner because I was like, what did he get tested for so I can tell the vets?
Yeah.
And she was like, well, he got tested for feline AIDS and kitty leukemia. And I started crying then because I didn't know that was a fucking thing. I didn't know there was cat AIDS.
Yeah.
That is so sad.
There definitely is cat AIDS. So you're taking Desi
to
the vet.
So this is how I react with animals, right? I'm taking him. He's crying on the street.
Sure.
Because
very
it's
upsetting.
so scary.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing, I'm not upset because he's crying. I'm upset because I'm putting myself in his little cat shoes, right? Or his little cat paws.
Little cat paws.
And I'm thinking about what he's thinking right now. And I am like, this has to be so fucking scary.
Yeah.
And then I start thinking about that. So this is where we go into crazy land.
Okay.
So it's weird enough that our cat has a little mark and I'm almost in tears, right?
Yes.
Here's why I was almost in tears. I start creating these backstories in my head. Two of them. The first one is I'm the cat, right?
All right.
And I start thinking that clearly he thought he did something wrong because the last two places he's been were homes.
So like we were sending him back or something.
So we were sending him back.
Yeah.
So
that's
I
so
start
sad.
thinking.
I thought about that too.
So he's in this little cage, right? He's looking out and sees like trucks and dogs, and it's really scary as it is. And then I'm like, what if Desi thinks he did something bad and we're sending him back and we don't love him anymore, right? So I'm walking down the street like this. So at first,
are you telling him I love you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm holding the cage. At first I was holding the cage down like you'd carry like a grocery bag,
like
right?
a suitcase or something.
But then I literally walk 6 blocks there I lift it up with one hand. I put my other hand underneath it. So he's in front of me at eye level. And I'm just saying, no, you're good. I love you. And I'm walking down. I'm almost like crashing into people. So then I get there, right? And I sit down and someone brought its dog in and his dog got a little too close to Desi.
Oh,
and I'm like,
bullshit.
And I'm like, hey, what the fuck do you think you're doing? And he looked at me and I'm like, I'm sorry. This is my first time at the vet. So I have to apologize. Like I had to be like, do you not watch cartoons? Do you know how cats feel about dogs? You fucking idiot. So immediately almost kicked out of the vet, right? And so I apologize to everybody. I'm like, this is my first time. I'm very emotional.
So there you go. I think you will agree, and I'm positive that Jamie would agree, that his level of empathy is a little bit off the charts. I mean, like, people love their pets. Everyone loves their pets and can sympathize to some extent with how he was feeling. But I think we all know that was a little bit, beyond the norm, shall we say. So empathy, I think that is an incredibly large factor in our decisions on food and how we feel about factory farms and the like. Now, here's the last thing for the day. Remember, this is a 2-part commentary. I'm going to come back to this in the next show. The other thing that I learned while working for a climate change nonprofit, so my boss had become a vegetarian for purely climate reasons, not ethical reasons, but because meat consumption and production is such a large contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, he felt it was imperative that he become a vegetarian. And he learned from a friend of his who is a psychologist that there is a very specific reason why people have such a hard time in making rational decisions about their food choices based on evidence and facts and morality or whatever. And the reason for that is that the same part of the brain that controls our food choices is also the part of the brain that controls, wait for it, our religious affiliations. In other words, completely irrational. Now, that is not to say, don't be confused, it is not completely irrational to wish to have a religious affiliation, but the way we choose our religious affiliations is, I believe, irrational. It is generally based on how we grew up, how we were raised, what religion our parents were. There are lots of really, really smart Christians who've grown up in America, believe very strongly in the Christian faith, who can also recognize with a great deal of clarity that had they been born in the Middle East, they would be Muslim and would feel as strongly about that faith as they do about their own today. And they understand that things could have been different purely by chance, but they still feel that their faith is right. And that is, cognitive dissonance at its finest. So anyways, religious affiliations, completely irrational, same part of the brain that's in charge of deciding what we eat. It's an uphill climb, to say the least, to get people to change the way they eat based on facts and evidence. And we will get into some of those facts and evidence in the next show, because I'm sure you're very excited to hear that I have a whole slew of voicemails already on this topic that I did not play earlier because I wanted to kind of squash the conversation before it got out of control. Because if I had played those before, I would have gotten more and more and more voicemails. So I just let it simmer down for a while, and now I'm bringing it back up, and I'm going to play some of those voicemails and react to them as they happen. It should be lots of fun for everyone.